For some time in this movement, we've taught the repeating pattern. Boston, Concord, Exeter. How a message comes, there's an increase of knowledge and a formalization. And yet when we think about that message, for many of us, I think all of us, we can disconnect it. That's not wrong to do. To break a message down into its individual parts. But we also need to be able to reconnect it. So we can properly understand what God is doing. There was a message that plowed God's people. A message that acted as the early rain. A message that acted as the latter rain. And you know it will be a message that acts as the harvester. This message is not many messages. It is specific. And that might seem hard to defend. Because even with our ploughing, we see two important messages. Reform lines and Daniel 11:40-45. And we can tend to split them. Like there are two different messages that plough us. I want to suggest, state, that is not so. They are linked. The one that opens up at the beginning is reform lines. It's absolutely fundamental to this movement. Every single light that comes afterwards is built upon reform lines. So reform lines are innocent. They don't challenge anybody. To say that Moses and John the Baptist fulfilled the same job function, does not threaten anyone. Many people like that concept. I could meet someone in the world and they say, "What do you believe? What's your religion?" And I could say, history repeats. That there's these periods of history, like Israel, Moses, Christ, where there's a specific work, and that repeats through patterns and structures. Everyone will say, "That's nice." We might not agree. We don't feel threatened. We like that concept. Worldly people say that. Adventists say that. But it didn't stay with just reform lines. It developed to Daniel 11:40-45. And the principle of this, as in verse 40, there is the beginning of a reform line, part A, and then another reform line, part B. So now this becomes not so innocent, because it's teaching we are now in a reform line. Daniel 11:40-45, from part B in verse 40 through to the early verses of Daniel 12. are showing that we're in a reform line that will take us to the second advent. Now it threatens people because now they know they have to fear God, give Him glory. They're about to be judged. Now it's a threat, a test. New dispensation. A new message is unsealed. This is the 2520. It teaches that you have a 25-20 year time span that can take you to 1798. And another 25-20 year time span that can take you to 1844. That threatens no one. What difference does it make to anyone, Adventist or in the world, if there's this time span to 1844? It's not a threatening message, but it developed. The 2520 developed into the 126 and the 151. Now it impacts you. It takes us to 1989. It takes us to 2014. It says the Sunday law is 2 years away. And now it's a threatening message. And it requires a change in behavior. People like the reform lines. They don't like this. People love the 2520. Elder Jeff loves the 2520. He did not like this. New dispensation. This was all about the King of the North and the King of the South. Everyone accepted. Everyone loved those studies. Triple application. First World War plus the Second World War equals the Third World War. There's nothing about that study that needed anyone in this movement to change their behavior. The problem is there's implications. The King of the North and the King of the South is the study of two powers in a church-state relationship that act as polar opposites to each other. It's the first time, I would suggest, in history, ever, that God's people have had a definition of the King of the South. Before this study was presented, you could have asked people in this movement, what is the nature of the King of the South? And you would have had some confused answer. And in the end, their arguments were weak. They could be easily broken down. But once we started this study, which is more than anything about the King of the South, the King of the North is a side player. It's all about the King of the South. It gave us the definition of the King of the South. It's a church-state relationship, just like Babylon. But it's the state over the church. This led us to equality. This wasn't a threat to anyone in this movement. This was. This required a change in our behavior. Elder Jeff accepted this, rejected this. Because the 25-20 was not the test. Everyone accepted this, but later rejected this. Because this was not the test. And because people accepted this, others assumed they'd passed the test. But they had not. I knew they had not. Because they rejected two streams of information. And as that developed, we understood this was the link. Understanding two streams of information is what takes you from a study of the King of the South and the King of the North to equality. This is why everyone seemed to accept at the beginning. Because this was not a threat. And this had not been clearly presented to them. So they could oppose this without needing to separate from us. But the minute we made gave our firm position about equality, they had to reject. I'll remind you about William Miller. He rejected the second angel's message and the third angel's message. At some point in time, he pretended to accept the second. This was much clearer. By the time he's rejecting the third, he's no longer pretending to be part of the movement that bears his name. William Miller became no longer a Millerite. That didn't happen here with the second angel. That happened here with the third. So this is just some revision. If there's fathers in this audience, if they can help take care of the children, because they're all at the front. And I don't know why the fathers can't take some of the children if they're here and able to do that. So the mothers can listen. So I want to focus on this dispensation, 2014 to 2019. Began with the King of the North and the King of the South. We do not have the possibility of going through all of that study in detail, of how every step linked to another. But I just want to give us the basic outline. So if this doesn't seem comprehensive, we will, I can refer you back to previous presentations where we do this much more thoroughly. It's been laid out for over 18 months now. So all I'm going to do is give you the concepts. The study opened up with Acts 27. Acts 27 was the catalyst that took us to the study of Pyrrhus. So Acts 27, we do it down here, showed us a journey on 2 ships. And in this history, where we can take Panium to Sunday law, we find this waymark symbolized by the 273. So we have this history of Panium to Sunday law. And this number, 273, from other witnesses, we're able to see is linked or symbolizing the Levites. So we can take this to another study. Once we go to 273 BC, it takes us to the same dispensation, a whole nother reform line, from Panium to Sunday law. Because the Levites are harvested, they join this movement from Panium to Sunday law. So you can see we have a theme. Our theme is Levites. Our theme links 2 whole reform lines. The ship of Alexandria, the experience of God's church, with another reform line, another line, about the king of the north and the king of the south. Alexandria, regarding God's church, king of the north, king of the south. But both have that same link, showing us the experience of the Levites. So Acts 27 becomes a key that unlocks the history of Pyrrhus. This was how it began. Understanding this link from Acts 27 to Pyrrhus. Now, without going into the details of explaining it, I just want to show us what developed from this. There's no time in 2 presentations to present it all and go through the steps. The history of Pyrrhus took us, built piece by piece the following model. You have 2 wars. There's the 3rd Diadochi War. And the 4th Diadochi War. 2 wars. After these wars, you have another period we'll discuss in a moment. 3rd and 4th Diadochi Wars. They center around the breakdown of Alexander's empire. We find the history of Pyrrhus and his relationship to those generals. We find the history of Antigonus and his son, who become symbols of the king of the north. So it's the 3rd and the 4th Diadochi War. Acts 27 unlocks this history. It takes us to these generals and starts to define them. The Third and the Fourth Diadochi War are one war between the same people with an armistice in the middle. This unlocks World War I and World War II. So the Third Diadochi War and the Fourth Diadochi War, they unlock the history of World War I and World War II. This is the triple application. World War I plus World War II equal World War III. So this is World War III. Now it isn't that it's in two parts. You take all of this, fits to here. All of this fits to here. It's not the world wars in two parts. That's how we do a triple application. We don't say the first and second woe represent two halves of the third woe. It's not how we use triple application. World War I gives us the history of World War III. World War II gives us another history of World War III. When we start drawing them out, we will see how they fit. So they do fit together. So the Third and Fourth Diadochi War unlock the First and Second World War, which not when you keep them like this, but when you combine them, become the Third World War. Now, it doesn't just stay here. It's going to develop further. There's this other history. After the Fourth Diadochi War, where you have Pyrrhus versus Lysimachus. So after this war is completed, Antigonus and then Demetrius defeated, you find Pyrrhus versus Lysimachus. This history, this battle, war, becomes the Cold War. So there's 3 wars, not 2. Third Diadochi War, Fourth Diadochi War. Pyrrhus versus Lysimachus. World War I, World War II. But then there's a third war. The Cold War. So you have 3 wars. World War III becomes a combination of these 2. We find it ending at Panium, but then it gives us extra information of the history of Panium to the Sunday Law. So it extends past. So to recap, I haven't proven how we do this. If we can just see the structure. The Third and the Fourth Diadochi War was unlocked by Acts 27. These lines unlocked World War I and World War II. It's this triple application. World War I plus World War II equals World War III. World War I and World War II are not separated like this, where you have War I, War II. Instead, you combine them. When you combine them, it becomes World War III. We're given extra information, like a bonus pack. There's another war. Pyrrhus fights with Lysimachus. This was a Cold War, fought through sanctions and subterfuge. Bring us to the Cold War. Exact same mode. These two show us the history of Panium to Sunday law. So World War III ends at Panium. But there's a process as the ripple effects of the end of that war take time to come to completion. If we were to take this model to the beginning of our reform land, what date is this? 1989. 1989 is the defeat of the King of the South. Panium is the defeat of the King of the South. So you have the defeat of the King of the South here. But 1989, the death blow has been struck. The deadly wound inflicted. But if I received a deadly wound, it takes me time to die. The King of the South received a deadly wound in 1989. It did not die until 1991. It took time for the effects of 1989 to fully break down the Soviet Union. We find the same thing from Panium to Sunday law. It's going to take time for the events at Panium to fully weaken and kill the King of the South. But World War III ends here. So this is the structure that was developed. Hope that makes sense. Acts 27 brought us to unlocking this study. We first unlocked World War II at the very beginning in 2016, early 2017. This was August 2019. So it took us over 2.5 years for this to develop, till we had both parts. The last pieces just slotted into place in August, September. That was the work of God. However, Elder Jeff tries to say, this was human wisdom. Really, if I wanted to get a big head, I wouldn't listen to you, who say this is the work of God. I would listen to Elder Jeff, who says that This was all my work. But I was wrestling with World War I for 2 to 3 years before it fell into place. I can't take you back through that experience. You have to take my word for it that I could not open this. However hard I tried. But it opened at exactly the right point in time to the week when this movement needed it. The only reason I review that history is not to say anything about myself, but to counter these arguments that it was my work. Was my work. I never went to university. I never liked history. I don't think I'm particularly clever. And I tried as hard as I could to open up World War I. I don't know how many of us have studied World War I. It's very complicated. But it opened up to the days that closed this message just in time. In fact, it really slotted into place the final elements of this after the study of equality. So, when Elder Jeff says, this study is the work of God, but Tess intentionally twisted this study because she wanted to teach 2 streams of information and she wanted to teach equality. So he says, this is the work of God, this is the work of Tess, this is the work of Tess. The reason why God didn't let World War I open until after these studies had already begun to be presented in a clear and emphatic fashion is because that destroys his argument. This study was presented in October 2018. But there were major elements of it that were missing. Particularly this part. And this was unlocked using the same methodology as this. It completed gaps in this history, in our history. Filled in missing information. And the process by which this picture was completed began in 2016 and ended in August 2019. So if Elder Jeff says this is the work of God, and this is the work of Satan and myself in union, then he has a problem accepting this. Which is why they can't fight it. They don't even speak about it. They don't present it. They pretend it doesn't exist. Because equality is intimately linked to the study of the King of the North and the King of the South. You will hear them attack this part. But they can't fight this. So they're silent. They might attack our understanding of November 9, November 9. But they cannot attack the triple applications of the world wars. So I want us to review these histories and see how they combine. We're going to combine two because there's a history of pirates in Italy which acts as extra information. It gives us pirates in two parts. It's another layer here. But we'll combine them. If we were to start with the Fourth Diadochi War, because we'll work in the order by which they were unlocked, not the order on the board. So Fourth Diadochi War first. So we'll show its development. The Fourth Diadochi War began when the King of the North takes satellite states, one particular satellite state, from the King of the South. So what began this war was the taking of this satellite state. You come down to 2014. You have the King of the North plus the King of the South plus the King of the South in an alliance. So now we have our two powers, the King of the North and the King of the South, in this alliance. That's one thread. But if we remember Pyrrhus' history in Italy, you also have the King of the South attack a satellite state. I'm going to stop calling them satellite states and call them spheres of influence. So the King of the South takes a sphere of influence, violently attacks it. At the same time, you see this alliance. And then we have the history of 3 battles. 4 battles. Ipsus, Heraclea, Asculum, and Beneventum. Ipsus, Heraclea, Asculum, Beneventum.
Ipsus, Heraclea, Asculum, Beneventum.
Beneventum is the defeat of the King of the South. This takes us to the end of that war.
Man ter wana hel kimel wanyo.
He's defeated here.
Eno loy kano.
Death is inevitable,
To di bera medo mu pero romu gogo.
but it's going to take a period of time.
Ete bera medo hurri.
Defeated here,
Loy kano.
progressive fall
Amenguti ya wara
into Argos,
nahi kwenye woni agos.
where you find the king of the south killed.
Yinu abaha me ko timo bera mu ne.
So this is the progressive fall.
Mando be porramo kola.
So this is the history of this fourth Diadochi War.
Mano be ko pokaro ko kom wen me lo ma wen me dai doki.
In connection with Pyrrhus in Italy, the Pyrrhic War.
Kumuchu utu dekede a wenye Pyrrhus.
Because we could complicate this
Pia rom me you better take.
and explain there were two wars that unlocked World War II.
Potom nia yeni ti luenya rio me do gonyo a wenyu lo mario.
Because at each step we need witnesses.
Pieni yo ara ka kiali shutu ne no kadena kola me.
We had two witnesses
Oneno dikan kadena rio.
that the number 273
Amodu ne no mia rio pier bir de.
represents the Levites in this time period.
Umeda nyuti wa ulevi.
One is Acts 27,
Achabo tu kana pero ya biro.
one is Numbers chapter 3.
Achalo pero a wel chura me wela de.
So we had two witnesses
Odikere chadena rio.
to take us to the line of Pyrrhus.
Me te ruana he yore me Pyrrhus.
Once we came to Pyrrhus,
Wando bini Pyrrhus.
we had two witnesses
Lodikel chadena rio.
to take us to World War II.
Ete wana he wenyu lo mario.
Because then we had the Pyrrhic War.
Eno kadi unke wenya Pyrrhus.
So I don't want that to confuse anyone.
Kami muru swing ataro.
I just want us to demonstrate how strong our methodology was.
Ame ni wanta unyangu kitame yuti shwatek kere.
Two witnesses defended the history of Pyrrhus.
Chadena rio metia me watu metia chuako kopokar kom Pyrrhus.
Two histories of war
Luenya rio.
unlocked World War II.
Ametu konye wenyu lo mario.
At each point we have multiple witnesses.
Yora chero tikere chadena Paul.
That's why the study was able to move the way it did.
Enyi no mio kwani no bela me woru kitame woru kere.
Because every time the study developed
Ene chawa tutame kwani tutame chada.
and we took another step,
Doctor yor kene.
we could do so with a great deal of trust we're making the right moves.
Wanu do belo dunia hini wan tika wotu wota kakare.
Because each step was made with multiple witnesses.
Kin wota wantu wotu tiamo mi chadena duong Paul.
That what we were seeing in history was true.
Bila wantu ne ko pokaro kamo belo kakare.
So these two witnesses
Chadena rio ikanu no.
unlocked World War II.
Gonyo wenyu lo mario.
So we came to World War II next. We're missing a lot of information in these wars, but we have to do that for time. World War II began with a proxy war between the King of the North and the King of the South. So we have the taking of satellite state, this proxy war. They're the same thought. This proxy war was over Spain. A proxy war between Hitler and Stalin. This was the war, a proxy war between Rome and Tarentum. Or another proxy war between Cassander and Demetrius. So we have the beginning of a proxy war over a satellite state. In World War II, this is over Spain. If you've heard of the dictator Franco, he was a fascist, like Hitler and what was the Italian? Mussolini.
Bala Italy kare Mussolini.
Hitler, Mussolini, Franco.
Ila Mussolini Franco.
Because the fascists won the proxy war. After they just fought a proxy war, everyone knows that they're arch enemies, but they go into an alliance. The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. This is an alliance between the King of the North and the King of the South, Hitler and Stalin. This was all done so Hitler could not attack the East, not to go to war with Stalin, but because he wanted to attack the West. He wanted to attack Poland. So this alliance is concluded so he can go to war with Poland. This is the beginning of the war on the Western Front, enabled by the King of the South. We need a bigger board. It won't all fit. I'll just see. We're having to skip a lot. That's why it's hard. Just want us to note the Battle of Ipsus. You find 3 allies. With Poland, you find 3 allies. You always see this pattern of the 3 and the 3. You find that the pact crumbles. The pact fell apart. It's broken. So the King of the North and the King of the South are in an alliance. This allows the King of the North to attack a different front, the West. They do this together. So they go into an alliance. The King of the South helps the King of the North start a war. But then their alliance begins to crumble. So Ipsus is a war where the King of the North and the King of the South are working together. Then they start to fight. The pact is broken, but this is just a small warning of what's about to come, which is open war. This is Operation Barbarossa, the beginning of war on the Eastern Front. So Stalin and Hitler, they're allies. They conclude this alliance. Hitler helps Stalin. Sorry, Stalin helps Hitler to begin a war on the West. Their relationship begins to break down. And then these allies go to war. They go to war from 1941 to 1945. The end of the war. Now remember what we've taught about failure and success. These are alpha histories. This is an omega history. And you can prove that on 2 witnesses. You can prove that through the history of Pyrrhus. You can prove that through the history of the papacy. Again, Alpha and Omega histories. Failure and success. Two witnesses. The history of the papacy, which is the counterfeit. It's the alpha history of the counterfeit. Second witness, it's the alpha history of Pyrrhus that connects. So even if you don't understand the details of that, it's two witnesses to say that this is a history of failure and alpha history. If you want to bring in our own reform lines, you have three witnesses. So this war ends between Hitler and Stalin, and the King of the North is defeated. But it's a history of failure for the King of the North. So you would expect history of success, victory for the King of the North. And when you do the counterfeit, 1945 is the counterfeit of 1844. 1844 was disappointment and failure for the Millerites, because it's their alpha history. 1945 was disappointment and failure for the King of the North, because it's their alpha history. And we have at least two witnesses. And then we have the history of the Cold War. Then we come to our third. The Third Diadochi War. So this is all laid out in October 2018. And what it's particularly focusing on is 1989, the time of the end, and this history of the Fourth Diadochi War plus World War II, with at least two witnesses, opens up 2014 through to the Sunday Law. Because this was our focus. The midnight cry was to open up this date, 2019. So it's focusing, drawing all of our attention to our dispensation here of 2014 to 2019. This relationship between the King of the South, Vladimir Putin, and the King of the North, in these stories, Donald Trump, lining up with Hitler. So this is what opened up from 2016 to 18, presented in October 2018, the history of 2014 to 2019, and then also giving us information of Panium and Sunday Law. So that was how it was. We had this side of the equation. But you may notice it does take us from 1989, the time of the end. But there's a significant gap. Now I said before, it's not World War I, World War II. You have to combine them. Both take you from 1989 to the Sunday law. So they're both combined or overlaid. But at the same time, World War I particularly unlocks the early history, while also covering this history. So it won't give us as many details for this history. It'll still cover the major waymarks. But the focus of World War I is here. And the focus of World War II is here. So you have to combine them. They'll all take you from 1989 to the Sunday law. But the majority of information you find in World War I is to unlock the early history. The majority of information you find in World War II unlocks the later history. I hope we can see the providence in that as well. When the midnight cry is to be presented, what it is meant to do, first, largest priority is to unlock our own dispensation. It's to unlock the latter rain time period and explain to us what has happened from 14 to 19. So I see it as the hand of God that He would give us World War II first, so our focus can be drawn appropriately to our own dispensation, focusing on the close of our probation. So World War II came first in the history of 16 to 18. Through 2019, this side began to open up. We already knew that this had to be a triple application. Before I ever understood World War I believe I presented on multiple occasions that this must be a triple application. So in presentations I would say, our story isn't complete yet, because I hoped people might look at World War I. So we knew from early on that this must be a triple application, and we're only utilizing half of that. So the other half had to unlock. So the first witness is a triple application. That's why we knew we needed World War I. Second witness. Third and fourth Diadochi Wars are one war between the same people. Antigonus versus allies. Third war. Fourth war Antigonus versus allies. Towards the end of it, it's his son Demetrius versus the same allies. So through that whole history, up to here, it's the Antigonid dynasty versus Cassander, Lysimachus, Seleucus and Ptolemy. One war with a break. We knew that this represented the one war with a break. In the middle here, you find Seleucus begin to establish himself. He begins to establish his dynasty, become powerful. Between World War I and World War II, you have the experience of the papacy as it goes into an alliance with Mussolini, the Lateran Treaty, as it goes into an alliance with Hitler and takes control of the German church. You have Antigonus, the king of the north. But you also have Seleucus. And Seleucus is rising between these two wars. So the papacy was rising between these two wars. You can call both the king of the north depending on your story. We know that we have the United States and the papacy. Here you have Antigonus and Seleucus. We all know the symbology attached to Seleucus. So this is what we were given first. And it was the wisdom of God that knew we needed World War II first. Because our focus should be here. When we're here. It was evident that we needed a thorough explanation of our own dispensation. So to repeat myself, triple application. World War I, World War II. Both take you from 1989 here to the Sunday law here, and showing completion the relationship between the King of the North and the King of the South. But World War I particularly gives information for the early history. It's this that is unlocked. World War II particularly gives information for this history. And it's 2014, the dispensation of our latter rain. 2019, the dispensation of our harvest that are particularly unlocked to us. So after this was all presented many times, the Third Diadochi War opened up. And it will again take us from the time of the end. It's going to give us a lot of information, particularly on this history. it becomes difficult to present these quickly, particularly when you're coming into the history of World War I, the Third Diadochi War, because they're really confusing histories. So when presented, it's best done slowly. It's best done slowly and broken down into individual parts. And when you see that common thread, remove it from all the noise. It's really quite simple. It's not complicated. What complicates it is there's a lot of surrounding noise, particularly when it comes to World War I. So the Third Diadochi War. There's been an ongoing war between Antigonus and his greatest threat. So for some years now, there's been two superpowers. Now there are many powers, many generals, but there are two superpowers that are controlling everything. Those two superpowers are Antigonus and Eumenes. The Battle of Gabini, you find these two superpowers fight one final battle. Antigonus and Eumenes. They meet in battle. It's in the east. There is this large salt plain. It's like a large flat area. Very dusty. They charge each other with elephants. And the feet of these charging elephants stir up a dust cloud that blocks each other from view. So I don't want to give all the history. The points that are relevant. Because of this dust cloud, it confuses the battle. Neither side clearly wins in battle. How Antigonus defeats Eumenes is through subterfuge. He takes control of the wealth of leading members of Eumenes' army. He captures their families and belongings. So this war is not ended in battle. It's when Eumenes, when Eumenes is overthrown by his own people. It's his own people that rise up, make a deal with Antigonus, and hand over their leader. So it's the work of Antigonus. It's him that convinces the people to do this. But it's Eumenes' own people that overthrow him. So this is the Battle of Gabini. But neither side clearly win in that battle. Instead, the results of this is the defeat of Eumenes from the inside by his own people. As Antigonus convinces them to rise up and overthrow him. So Eumenes is defeated from the inside. Antigonus has two allies. Seleucus and Python. So there's two allies. Seleucus and Python. So I'm going to make direct application, because otherwise we'll lose all these threads. Fourth Diadochi War. World War II. Show us there has been a proxy war between the two superpowers. The Third Diadochi War shows that one of those superpowers, Eumenes, representing the Soviet Union, Eumenes had control, not directly, but through proxies, of all of the eastern satellite states of Alexander's empire. Just as the Soviet Union had control of the eastern satellite states. So whether it's the Third Diadochi War or this history of the Cold War, it's all fought in and over eastern satellite states. Eumenes represents the Soviet Union. They're fighting over eastern satellite states. Eumenes is overthrown, defeated from the inside. Antigonus convinces Eumenes' own army his own people to overthrow him. The United States convinced the people of the Soviet Union to dismantle their own government. Who tore down the Berlin Wall? The Soviets did. The people of Eastern Berlin, the people of the Soviet Union, tore down their wall, conducted revolutions, protested, overthrew their own government. Eumenes from the inside, Soviet Union from the inside, fought in and among eastern satellite states. And Antigonus, the king of the north, had two allies. The United States had two allies. The first was the papacy. John Paul II, who believed it was his work, life and death message for the papacy, to destroy the Soviet Union. So Reagan, Bush, they're in an alliance with John Paul. There's another alliance. The United States had an ally with Python. That's Antigonus king of the north,
abahamento piny
with Python.
ke Python.
Seleucus did not fight in the army of Antigonus.
Seleucus popino luenya Antigonus.
He gave support in other ways.
Endo muo konyi yora bor.
The papacy did not fight in the army of the United States.
Papa si Paul luenyi kom luenyi USA.
He used different methods.
Endo tiuke yor kene.
Python fought directly
Python luenyo.
in the army.
Luenya achil mateki lueny.
And the United States
United States.
had the Mujahideen.
Gido uligeja yuni mujahideen.
They fought directly
Gido luenyo gini.
in this proxy war.
Luenyo gini wata tipu pipi no.
A proxy war
Luenyo tipi pipi.
is a fight between two superpowers
Luenyo tipi pipi ubol luenyo meti yakino tehario.
using proxies.
Amero kati kile jogi.
So in this war,
Luenyi.
you had the United States,
Udigere USA.
the Soviet Union.
Soviet Union.
They're fighting over Afghanistan.
Kaya luenyo gini ikom dome Afghanistan.
The United States
USA.
is using the Mujahideen.
Kaya tike jomo luni mujahideen.
And the Soviet Union,
Soviet Union.
they're using
Tuti jinkere.
that puppet government they set up.
Tuti jinkere government ya meginu keru gini maru.
So the United States fought in that war through the Mujahideen.
USA te luenyi ndeo ke jajalo uni mujahideen.
Python fought on behalf of Antigonus.
Python te luenyi pi Antigonus.
The Mujahideen fought on behalf of the United States.
Luenyi te luenyi gini pi United States.
Antigonus wins.
Antigonus ti loyo.
United States wins.
United States te loyo.
They defeat the enemy
Loyo gina kuogi.
from the inside
Yeah.
using two allies.
Se tike jo ario note.
One who fights directly,
Achela me luenyi me achil pineno.
one who uses other methods.
Achela me tiuke yo ke enda ki.
And they take control of the eastern satellite states of the empire.
Ite gamu gini loyo gini tu loba me tu kide.
You go from two superpowers
Kada uworo neno te hario teki.
restraining each other
Tiame tu gen uworo ki karti achel.
to one superpower.
Me ber dana chel.
You go from two superpowers,
Ya gini ya te hario tek.
the Soviet Union and the United States,
Neno Soviet Union ke USA.
to one superpower.
Me ber ha te hachel dong.
And now you have the introduction of the United States
Gine neno dong new to USA kano.
as a dictatorship.
Bara matbal ba he chonye.
We said before,
Wanu kobo.
this is 1989
Manu bedo muhakinya chele mi abongo ni pier bobi abongo.
to 1991.
Na muhakinya chele mi abongo ni pier abongo na chel.
So if you want to know what the United States looks like
Ni tumenyo kila USA tikere.
as a dictator,
Chala na boat la he chonye.
it's already told you.
La chonye.
If you want to know what that head looks like,
Kami tumenyo kila wiye no tikere.
up here,
Kakane.
this new head,
Maune no wite nyem.
you've already seen it in action.
Ati mure nena kore tikere bisho.
This is not the UN.
Mambo bedo UN.
This is the United States,
Mambo USA.
after the defeat of the King of the South,
Yonge loya bah me toping.
acting as a superpower.
Ametia achung chala te hadi.
So we lined these up
How ke tu yor biti.
so that we could explain this history before we lost memory of our information. Now Antigonus begins to become powerful. But he's not the only one. Python is also going to grow in power. Nowhere near to the extent of Antigonus. Nowhere near as much as Antigonus. But he's still going to grow. Python became more powerful. The Mujahideen changed their name to one you're more familiar with. And in 1996, they became the Taliban and took control of Afghanistan. So they were just the rebels the United States used that had no control over the government. They changed their name to the Taliban and they become the government of Afghanistan. Antigonus began to see Python as a threat. So once he's reached power, Antigonus has him killed. His former ally, who fought on his behalf, became more powerful, so he has him killed. The Mujahideen became more powerful, became the Taliban, and in 2001, the United States went into Afghanistan and overthrew the Taliban. Now I want to make an important observation. A misunderstanding many people have, not just this movement. The United States made a significant mistake here that they recognize now. It becomes important to recognize that mistake because the lines demonstrate it. Who attacked America at 9/11? Al-Qaeda. Is Al-Qaeda the Taliban? No. So you have Al-Qaeda. Not sure if I'm spelling it right. But you have Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. The Taliban is the government of Afghanistan in 2001. They are not a terrorist group. They are Islamic, hardline Islamic, but they are not a terrorist group. Al-Qaeda is. They're not a country government. They're a terrorist organization. So why did America attack Afghanistan after 9/11? Because they knew that the Taliban were allowing this terrorist organization to hide out in Afghanistan. But here's their mistake. They decided that their work was to take down Al-Qaeda, to destroy this terrorist organization. So in 2001, they go into Afghanistan, and their job description said destroy Al-Qaeda. Once they entered Afghanistan, the American government and generals said, while we're here, why don't we do some regime change? Instead of just taking down Al-Qaeda, why don't we change the regime of Afghanistan and take down the Taliban? They could have just attacked Al-Qaeda and left the Taliban in power. But because they decided to make an enemy of both, that war became impossible to win. So America is still at war in Afghanistan today.
America na hechani potiame mutia umiero.
It's still at war.
America chani potik ilwen kere Afghanistan na hechawani.
It's been 19 years and this war has not stopped. They can't stop the war. They can't win the war. Because the Taliban is closely knit with Afghanistan society. And you just can't eradicate it. So they made an enemy of the Taliban, overthrew their former ally. It becomes important we separate the government from the terrorist organization. And just to note, most of those terrorists came from which country? Saudi Arabia. And this organization is largely funded by Saudi Arabia. But can they go to war with Saudi Arabia? No. They're allies. So they attack Afghanistan instead. What documentary will tell you that history? Sorry? Bitter Rivals? I don't know that one. I should. Michael Moore? Fahrenheit 9/11. If you want to understand that history. It was done in 2004, so it won't give you later information. But it'll explain some of those connections. So we'll stop now. I don't want people to get confused by all the details. Don't get lost in information. What I want people to see is the structure that's developed, and at each point by these multiple witnesses. From Acts 27, 2 witnesses to take us to this history. History of the Levites. It's a whole line that takes us to a whole line. Not cutting stories. The number is an original link. But between the 2 lines, it's like a catalyst that took us from one to another. But please make note, the evidence for this does not hang on the number. The evidence is on the connected histories. So 2 witnesses took us from Acts 27 to Pyrrhus. Pyrrhus in 2 witnesses took us to World War II. Then we had 2 witnesses to show that this is a history of failure. The study of the counterfeit, that developed independently, and the study of the Pyrrhic War. So a complete other study on the counterfeit gave us a second witness. Just when we needed it. Now for this history, 2 witnesses. 2 witnesses for 1 war. With a break in the middle. Triple application. And the 3rd and the 4th diadochi wars. Even if we cover all of this in 2 presentations, I want us to see the strength of the steps, the structure that develops. It's comprehensive. It was led of God. He saw fit to anchor us in this first, our own dispensation. But then right on time, literally days before it was presented, after 2 years of wrestling with it, this part opened up. World War I, World War II. Triple application. Both take you from the time of the end to the Sunday law. So they work like this. But the focus of World War I is this history. The focus of World War II is this history. But even with that triple application, God gives us 2 witnesses at every step. 2 to develop World War II. 2 witnesses to develop World War II. Once we have World War II, we can see 2 witnesses for the development of World War I. 2 witnesses to develop World War III. 2 witnesses to understand failure, success. We understand that God requires 2 or 3 witnesses to establish something. And each step was developed with multiple witnesses. And people may get fixated on the number 273, but none of this hangs on numbers. What does it hang upon? Lion upon lion. All of these studies hang upon the methodology God gave us in 1989. Not numerology, but line upon line. We'll complete this when we come back. If you kneel with me, we'll close in prayer. Dear Father in heaven, thank you for your Sabbath day. We know that the camp is coming to a close. Lord, there is so much light you've opened up to this movement over the last 31 years. May people not become confused or overwhelmed by details of information, as important as those details might be. I pray that they will see the methodology that you're using, the structures you have given us, and how you have led in the development of these truths. I pray, Lord, for this Sabbath day as we study together, that we might be able to encourage each other, strengthen each other, be a blessing to each other, and that each of us as we leave this camp might find ourselves well established in the truth, not in every detail of information, but in abiding trust that you have led and will continue to lead this movement. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.